Hi class, and welcome to Module 1 Part 2. Here's where we're going to talk about measures of center and measures of variance. So this Part 2 is going to help you answer your Deliverable 1 questions 2 through 4. Two objectives: to discuss and calculate all measures of center, and then to discuss and calculate all measures of variation. Okay. In statistics, we oftentimes look at samples of the population. We do this because studying a population would be far too time-consuming and often impossible. So for example, if you wanted to get the average height of all men in New York City, there's no way you're going to be able to get every single male height. So you would take a sample of the population and go from there. So when taking a sample, we gather the data and can use it to draw conclusions about the population. Okay, so again, the population, we want to do a representation of that. So we take a sample, and then from that sample, we make conclusions off of that, based off the population. So these conclusions will either be about the measures of center or the measures of variance. Measures of center. So in measures of center in statistics tell us about the middle of the data. So why do we care about the measures of center? And it's really important because we want to know, okay, what is our graph telling us? Okay, and one thing is, think about this: if you're applying for a job, I want to know, what is the median salary for this job that I'm applying to? What is the mean? Okay, there are 4 measures of center, and these are your mean, your median, your mode, and your mid-range. So mean, this is commonly known as the average. So to calculate the mean, what you do is you want to add all the data together and then divide by the number of data. Now, everything we do, we're going to be using in Excel. So again, you have to, when you turn in your deliverables, you always have to have an Excel spreadsheet, and you don't want to do anything by hand. You're going to want to use these equations. So in Excel, if I need to find the mean, I'm going to use this equation right here, equals average, and then in those parentheses, that's what you're going to type in the cells that you're using for that. The symbol for the sample mean, that is X bar, and the symbol used for the population mean is mu. And it's really important that you know the difference between them, okay? Especially when we go into Module 3, we're going to get more into that. Okay, so some advantages of the mean. Its concepts are familiar to most people. Every data set has one and only one mean, and it is useful for comparison. The disadvantages to your mean: it is affected by extreme values. So for example, if you randomly sampled 5 people in the United States for salary, and let's say the first 4 were around $40,000, but for the 5th person, you somehow got Jeff Bezos, and he, billions of dollars a year. If I did the mean of those 5 numbers, my mean is going to be quite high. It's not actually going to be representative of the majority of people. So the mean can be affected by extreme values. It is also tedious to calculate for large data. But not for us, because we're going to be using Excel, and we won't have crazy numbers of data either. And it cannot be calculated for group data with open-ended classes. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is the median. So the median, the data value that lies in the middle of the data when arranged in ascending or descending order. So in Excel, here's my equation, equals median, and then again, you'll put the cells in there. Okay, so one thing with median is you have to make sure that you arrange the data first. So if you're doing it by hand, it has to be in order from smallest to biggest or biggest to smallest. Okay, so advantages of the median: it is not affected by extreme values, because again, I'm just picking right in the middle. Okay, disadvantages: it does not contain information on the other values of the distribution. It's only selected by rank, and the median is less worthwhile to statistical tests. Okay, So here's just an example of if I had a bunch of data, and let's say I had a bunch of people who, again, with salary, I wanted to line that up. And here I noticed that the median, so let's say you had 100 people, and when I lined them all up, again, I picked that middle value. The median was 157,000. Now, if you notice here, the mean was 603,000. Okay, so again, like we said, the mean is affected by those extreme values where the median is not. So in this case, the median would be more representative of the data. Okay, the next thing we'll talk about is mode. So this is the data value that occurs the most. When you have two values that occur the same greatest frequency, we call the data set bimodal. When more than two data values occur with the same greatest frequency, we call the data set multimodal. When no data value is repeated, we say there is no mode. So in Excel, to find the mode, we're going to use this right here. In order to return multiple results, mode must be entered as an array formula. This means that several vertical cells must be selected before you enter the formula. So you want to highlight those in Excel, then put in the formula so it can give you multiple answers. Because if you don't do that, it'll only give, if there is more than one mode, it will only give you one answer. Okay. Array formulas are entered by pressing Control, Shift, and Enter at the same time. Okay. And then here's just some graphs looking at this. In Module 2, we're going to talk about the normal distribution, which is that bell curve, which is this one here. So that's when your mean, median, and mode are all the same value, which creates a symmetric graph or curve. So that means the 50% of the data is to the left, 50% of my data is to the right. If it's right skewed, okay, this is what it looks like here, and then left skewed, that is what it would look like there. So that just means that your mode and median and mean can all be in different spots. And then this one here, this is a great example of finding the mode. So again, if you wanted to create a little tally mark, you can. I noticed 6 would be the mode because that came up the most. There's 3 of those. So mode, some advantages. It is quick and easy to determine, is an actual value of the data and not affected by extreme scores. Disadvantages, sometimes it's not very informative, just depending on what we're looking at. Maybe it doesn't matter that something appears 10 times. Can change dramatically from sample to sample, and might be more than one mode in a data set. And if what we're looking at, if there's 5 modes, maybe that doesn't actually help us. Okay, the last thing we'll talk about here for that is the mid-range. So the value midway between the max and min data values. So this is similar to a midpoint. If you were computing it by hand, it's the max plus the min divided by 2. But again, we don't want to do that. We want to do everything in Excel. So here is my formula there. One of the key things is making sure I have these parentheses. Okay, if you don't have the parentheses, it's going to read it as the max plus the min divided by 2. And what that means is it's only going to divide the min by 2, not the sum of the max and min. So you want to make sure you put those parentheses, otherwise you'll have an order of operation error. Okay, so some advantages and disadvantages of your mid-range. It is easy to compute, and it gives you the midpoint. Disadvantages, so just like the mean, it is affected by extreme values. It is rarely used in statistical computations, and it is not always a value in the data set. Okay, so that was all on our measures of center. Now we're going to go ahead and talk about your measures of variance. So your measures of variation are the measurements that tell us how spread out our data points are. There's 3 of these that we'll be discussing, and that's going to be the range, the variance, and the standard deviation. Okay, so your range, this is just the difference between the max and the min. Okay, And again, even though you may be able to do this by hand, just look, there's my max, there's my min, we want to make sure we put this in Excel. Okay, so there's your formula there for your range for Excel. So it's your max, and then you're going to put in your cells minus the min, and then you select the cells that you want to use there. Some advantages and disadvantages of range. So advantages, it is very easy to compute, especially with Excel. Disadvantages, you're only using extreme values. It is rarely used in statistical computations, and it does not tell you anything about the data inside the range. Variance, okay? So the expectation of the squared deviation of a random variable from its mean. Informally, this is how spread out our data is, okay? So to do that by hand takes forever. I would never recommend doing that by hand. Also in this course, you won't get credit if you do it by hand. You have to use an Excel. So again, here's my formula here to use in Excel. And one thing with variance, if you notice here, see how it says S squared? When I'm labeling my answer, make sure your label is also squared. So if everything was in centimeters, I would label my mean, my median, my mode, etc. in centimeters. But if I'm talking about my variance, the label would have to be centimeters squared. So that's something important to notate, okay, because you'll have that in your deliverable. Okay. Advantages, each value in the data set is used in the calculation, used to calculate the standard deviation. Disadvantages, values far from the mean are given extra weight. Extreme values affect the variance considerably, and it's hard to calculate manually. I would never recommend doing that manually. Okay, and the last thing we'll talk about is our standard deviation. So the measure of how much data values deviate away from the mean. If individual observations vary greatly from the group mean, the standard deviation is big and vice versa. So here would be your formula if you were doing it by hand, which we will not be doing. So in Excel, here is my formula. And then the symbol used for sample standard deviation is S, and the symbol used for population standard deviation is sigma. Okay, again, you will have to know the difference between those two. Okay. Standard deviation, we'll go a lot more into this in Module 2, but that is how far away you are from the mean. Okay, so standard deviation, some advantages. Each value in the data set is used in the calculation. Very useful in theoretical work and statistical methods and inference. Disadvantages, it is hard to calculate manually. It's sensitive to extreme data values and not useful for nominal or ordinal data. Okay, so just to review, the measures of center were our mean, median, mode, and mid-range, and measures of variance are our range, variance, and standard deviation. Bonus, what is the Excel formula for each calculation? We're going to go over that when we do a few examples in Excel in just a second. Okay, and again, variables you should know. So X is just going to be the variable that I'm looking at, X bar. That's my sample mean. Mu is my population mean. S squared, okay, that is my variance. You have your standard deviation. Next, the sample is from, or S is for my sample standard deviation, and then your sigma is your population standard deviation. So at this time, I'm going to have you guys go back to your Excel and pull up the example from Module 1. Okay, so for Part 1, we answered these questions. Part 2, I'm going to go ahead and answer these. So I want to find my measures of center, mid-range, min, and max. And then I want to go ahead and find my measures of variance. So the range, variance, and standard deviation. And I'm just going to do these for, let's say we'll do it for age, okay? So we'll start with mean. So remember, your mean is equal to your average, okay? And then I'm at E2, so E2, and then I'm gonna go down, and I can highlight this, or you can also just type it in, okay? And I'm gonna get rid of this extra stuff. There we go, and hit enter. So my mean age is gonna be 38.0476. Most time we want you to round to 2 decimals, so that'd be 38.05. Okay, and again, I'm just gonna show you how I did that. So I did equals the average, and I went from E2 all the way to E22. So that's what they're gonna be looking for when you show your work for the deliverable for part 4. Okay, so now let's go ahead and do the median. So remember your median, so equals median, okay, nice pop up. Again, I'm gonna start here, oops, right there, E2, and again, you can just type to E22 if you want, or highlight it. I would say for me, it depends on how much data I have. In your deliverable 1, you have 364 pieces of data. So in that case, I would just do B2, semicolon B365. Okay, here we go. And then I hit enter, and now I know my median is 39. And the nice thing is this is actually gonna sort it for me. I don't have to actually sort it. Okay, so if you were doing it by hand, that's when you'd have to make sure you put it in ascending or descending order, but with Excel, it'll do it for you. Okay, so now we're gonna talk about the mode. Okay, so here we go. We have equals, mode, multiple. Okay, so again, I'm going from E2 to there. Enter. Okay. And if you notice here, mine gave me those. So that's when I know that there's most. So it's going to be 30, 32, 41, and 48. Now, my Excel, I have a more updated version, so it automatically does that. With yours, you may have to select the cells and hit insert or highlight them, so then you can get all your answers there. Okay, so make sure you use the mode mult. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is the mid-range. Now here, remember, this is what I was talking about with the parentheses, where you want to be careful. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do the parentheses. Okay, so then I'm going to hit the max. Okay, and again, I'm going to make sure I highlight it. So here to there. Okay. So I have my max, and then I'm going to do, okay, so again, I'm finding the mid-range here, so then that's going to be plus. Now I'm going to do my min. Okay, now again, I'm going to go ahead, so I'll just show you how you can, if you want to type it in, you, whoops. It's easier to type in. So that would be E2 to E, again, I'm just going to look, E22, okay, and I do need to fix this over here. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to make sure I close my parenthesis. Ooh, I don't know why I have that. That should just be E2. There we go. And one thing, if you notice, mine was highlighted in red. That was telling me I had an error. Okay, And now I'm going to hit divided by 2. So again, the key thing is I had those parentheses to make sure that I didn't have that order of operation error. So again, just going to bring that back up. I put that in parentheses, so the whole sum on the top was divided by 2. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the min. Okay, so how do I find the min? So this is equal, so min, there we go. And again, you can just type it in. So E2, E22, close the parentheses. Mine gives me this extra, so I just need to erase that. And that's just partly because I'm doing mine on my iPad. In Excel, if you're on your computer, it won't do that. Okay, so my min is 11. Okay, let's go ahead and do the max. So you can imagine that's just max. Okay, so again, E2 to E22. Just gonna go ahead and erase that. Okay, so my max is 102. And if you were looking, you could probably see that. Okay, and then actually what you can do, since I did the min and the max, instead of, so I did it like that, I could have also cell referenced. So if I wanted to do the min and the max first, I could have done this instead. So another way to get your mid-range is, I could have went like this. So equals, okay, and then parentheses. So then I could have done the max plus the min divided by 2. If you notice, I got the same answer. So it might, so if you don't want to write a bunch of stuff, you could have also done that with the cell referencing. Okay. One thing that's not on here, before I do the next one, I want to show you. I'll just say, so n. So that's, let's say I want to know how many numbers are in my data set. Okay. So what you can do, because this is going to be important later on, we'll have to know, and again, I don't want to necessarily count all my data. If you want to know, well, how many things am I sampling? Equals, you can put in counta, and then E2 to E22, return, I have 21 things in my data set. So that'll be important later on, so I just wanted to show that out there to show you how to do that. Okay, so now let's go ahead and do our measures of variation. So your measures of variation, so to figure out my range, that's going to be my max minus my min. Now since I already found that, I'm going to go ahead and use those values. So it equals my max, so again I'm cell referencing, minus my min, okay, here, and then I'm just going to hit enter, so I get 91. Okay, so your variance equals, okay, then I'm going to go ahead and type in my var. Okay, again, I'm going from E2 to E22. Then hit enter. Okay, so I get my variance. Again, make sure if when you're labeling, your variance gets squared. So years, this would be years squared when I was talking about that. Okay, and then my standard deviation. So equals, okay, my standard. Now, you always want to do the sample, not the p, because we're talking about a sample size. So again, E2 to E22. And then hit enter. Okay, so then there I have my standard deviation. Again, technically, when you go ahead and write your answer, I would label all these. So my mean is 38.05 years. Okay, the median is 39 years old. The mode is 30, 32, 41, and 48 years old. So make sure that when you write your answers, you do label it. And again, the variance would be years squared. Okay, well, that's it. This should help you on part 4 then when you answer that on your deliverable 1. Have a great day and email me.